I need you to stop whatever you are doing right now. Close every other tab. Put your phone down or pick it up. Whatever you need to do to give the next few minutes your full, undivided attention. Because what I am about to tell you is not a rumor. It is not speculation. It is not a headline designed to get you to click and then disappoint you with nothing behind it. What I am about to tell you is one of the most significant military events in the Middle East in a generation. And I mean that with every ounce of seriousness I have. Iran has struck Israel's most important military base. Let that land, let the full weight of that sentence settle in, because I think in the noise of a world that moves too fast and throws too many alarming headlines at us every single day, it is easy to hear something like that and not fully process what it means. So I am going to say it one more time clearly and directly. The Islamic Republic of Iran, not a proxy, not a militia, not Hezbollah acting with Iranian backing, but Iran itself, has launched a direct military strike against the most strategically critical military installation in the state of Israel. Tonight, right now, as you are watching this, I'm Rachel Maddow, and this is USA News, and I am going to be with you through every development of this story for as long as it takes, because this is the moment that changes the map. This is the moment that reshapes the entire equation of Middle Eastern security. This is the moment that every intelligence analyst, every military planner, every foreign policy strategist has had circled in red on their worst-case scenario board for years. And it just happened. Let me start by telling you what we know right now at this hour, because the details are still coming in, and I want to be honest with you about what is confirmed and what is still being assessed. Multiple sources with direct knowledge of the situation, as well as initial reporting from Israeli military channels and regional intelligence networks, are confirming that Iran launched a significant ballistic missile strike against what Israeli officials are describing as a primary military installation. The scale of the attack, the number of missiles fired, the specific targets within the base, the extent of the damage is still being evaluated in real time. Israel's air defense systems were activated. The Iron Dome, David's Sling, and Arrow missile defense systems, the layered architecture that Israel has spent billions of dollars and decades of engineering building precisely for moments like this, were all brought to bear. And we are receiving reports that while some incoming missiles were intercepted, others were not. Explosions have been reported. The full picture of what happened on the ground inside that base is still forming, and we will bring you every confirmed detail as it comes in. What I can tell you right now is that this is categorically different from everything that has come before. I want to be very precise about that, because context is not just background information in a story like this. Context is the story. Iran has attacked Israel before. Last year, in what was a watershed moment in its own right, Iran launched a large-scale drone and missile attack directly at Israeli territory. The first direct attack from Iranian soil on Israel in the history of the conflict between the two countries. That attack involved hundreds of drones and ballistic missiles. Israel, with the help of the United States, the United Kingdom, Jordan, and other regional partners, intercepted the vast majority of those projectiles. The damage was minimal. Iran seemed, in the aftermath, to have calculated that it had made its symbolic point that it could and would strike directly at Israel without triggering a full-scale war. There was a kind of terrible restraint in that moment, a violent message delivered with just enough precision to avoid the most catastrophic consequences. Tonight is different. Tonight, Iran did not aim at open desert. Tonight, Iran did not fire at symbolic targets designed to demonstrate capability without inflicting maximum damage. Tonight, Iran aimed at the beating heart of Israeli military power. Tonight, Iran struck the base that sits at the center of everything the Israeli defense forces do. The base that represents the command, the intelligence, the air operations, the strategic decision-making capacity that Israel depends on to defend itself and to project power in the region. Striking that base is not a message. It is not a demonstration. It is an act of war designed to degrade Israel's ability to fight back. And that distinction between sending a message and actually trying to break your enemy's capacity to respond is the most important distinction in military affairs. And Iran just crossed it. To understand why this base is so significant, I need to take a moment to explain what it represents, because I think most people outside of military and intelligence circles may not fully appreciate the degree to which a single installation can be the linchpin of an entire nation's security architecture. The base that Iran targeted is not just big, it is foundational. It houses the kind of command and control infrastructure, the intelligence processing capability, the air operations coordination systems, and the strategic planning functions that make the Israeli military the most capable fighting force in the Middle East. It is the place where Israel's military leadership thinks, coordinates, and directs. When Israel has conducted airstrikes in Syria to prevent Iranian weapons transfers to Hezbollah, and it has conducted hundreds of them over the years, the operations were coordinated through infrastructure that includes this base. When Israel has made decisions about its nuclear posture, about its deterrent strategy, about its responses to threats from Gaza and Lebanon and Iran, those decisions have been informed and enabled by the intelligence and command functions that this installation supports. Hitting it is not like hitting a runway or a fuel depot or an air defense battery. Hitting it is like trying to cut out the brain. Iran knows exactly what this base represents. The choice to strike it is a deliberate, strategic decision to try to blind and paralyze Israel's ability to mount a coordinated military response. And that tells you something chilling about what Iran's leadership is thinking tonight. It tells you that they are not just making a statement. They are trying to win something. Now, I need to talk about the Israeli response because that is the next chapter of this story, and it is coming fast. Israel has never, not once in its 76-year history, absorbed a direct attack on its military infrastructure without responding. The doctrine of the Israeli Defense Forces, built into every element of its military culture from the very beginning, is that attacks on Israel will be met with force that is disproportionate enough to deter future attacks. This is not a controversial observation. Israeli officials themselves have stated this doctrine explicitly, repeatedly, publicly. Deterrence through disproportionate response is the bedrock of Israeli military philosophy. So the question is not whether Israel will respond. The question is how, when, and at what scale. And those three variables, how, when, and at what scale, will determine whether what we are watching tonight becomes a contained, if historically significant, military exchange, or whether it becomes the opening act of a full-scale war between Israel and Iran that pulls in the United States, reshapes the entire Middle East, and carries consequences for global security that I genuinely do not think most people are prepared for. The most restrained end of the Israeli response spectrum would be targeted strikes on the specific Iranian military assets that carried out tonight's attack. The missile launchers, the command and control infrastructure, the Revolutionary Guard units responsible. That is painful for Iran. It is humiliating. It carries a cost, but it does not destroy the Islamic Republic. It does not fundamentally alter the Iranian state. It is a response that says, we will make you pay for every missile you fire at us, but we are not trying to bring your government down. The middle of the spectrum, and this is where Israeli military planners have been quietly doing wargaming for years, involves a much more ambitious targeting list. Iranian air defense systems, Iranian ballistic missile infrastructure, Iranian naval assets in the Persian Gulf, the command structure of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, including senior leadership. Strikes at that scale would represent the most significant military operation Israel has ever conducted against a nation-state. They would degrade Iran's ability to threaten Israel for years. They would also almost certainly trigger Iranian retaliation, and not just from Iran directly, but from the full constellation of Iranian proxy forces across the region. Hezbollah in Lebanon, Shia militias in Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen, potentially even Hamas remnants in Gaza, all of those actors taking simultaneous action against Israel and American assets in the region. That is a multi-front war of a kind and scale that the region has not seen in modern times. And then there is the far end of the spectrum, the option that is discussed in whispers and in classified briefings, the Iranian nuclear program. Israel has been staring at the Iranian nuclear program for decades, has conducted covert operations against it, assassinating scientists, sabotaging centrifuges, blowing up facilities, has pressured the United States repeatedly and urgently to take military action to destroy Iran's nuclear infrastructure before it reaches the point of no return. Tonight, with Iranian missiles having struck Israel's most critical military base, the argument that Israel can afford to continue living with an Iran that is inching toward nuclear capability becomes dramatically harder to sustain. If Iran is willing to do this, willing to directly strike Israel's military brain, what does Iran do when it has a nuclear weapon? That question is not hypothetical anymore. It is the most urgent strategic question facing the Israeli government in this moment. And I would be not doing my job if I did not tell you honestly that the option of a comprehensive strike on Iran's nuclear infrastructure is on the table in a way that it has not been before. I want to turn now to the United States, because America is not a bystander in this story. America is never a bystander in a story involving Israel and Iran. The United States has a security commitment to Israel that is as deep and as bipartisan as any commitment in American foreign policy. Both parties, through administrations of every ideological stripe, have affirmed that America stands with Israel's right to defend itself. And beyond that formal commitment, the United States has specific military assets in the region. At Al Udeid in Qatar, at bases in Bahrain, in Kuwait, in Jordan, in the waters of the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea, that give it both the capability and the exposure to be drawn into any escalating conflict very quickly. Donald Trump is the president of the United States tonight, and Donald Trump is being briefed right now on what has happened. I want to think carefully about what this administration's response is likely to be, because it matters enormously. Trump has a complicated relationship with both Israel and Iran that is unlike any previous American presidents. He is, by instinct and by political identity, one of the most pro-Israel presidents in American history. The recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital, the Abraham Accords, the killing of Qasem Soleimani, these were defining acts of a first term that signaled an unconditional alignment with Israeli security interests. At the same time, Trump has also, in his second term, shown a desire to avoid being drawn into new Middle Eastern wars. He has expressed at various points a preference for deals over conflicts. He has shown at least some interest in a negotiated framework with Iran. Tonight, those two impulses are going to collide. The impulse to stand fully with Israel in the face of a direct Iranian attack on Israeli military infrastructure, and the impulse to avoid being the president who starts a war in the Middle East that consumes his entire second term and potentially far beyond. Navigating that tension in real time, under pressure, with incomplete information, while the situation on the ground is still evolving, that is the challenge facing Donald Trump tonight. And the decision he makes in the next hours will define his presidency and potentially reshape the world. The question of American military involvement is not academic. United States military assets in the region are already on heightened alert. American warships in the Persian Gulf and the Eastern Mediterranean are almost certainly moving to more tactically advantageous positions right now. American air assets are being readied. The intelligence and surveillance architecture that blankets the region is running at full capacity, feeding information to CENTCOM, to the Pentagon, to the National Security Council. If Israel asks for direct American military support, and there is a meaningful possibility that it will, the United States will have to answer that request with something more than words. I want to take a moment to talk about Iran's calculations here, because I think understanding what Tehran was thinking when it made this decision is essential to understanding where this goes next. The new supreme leader, who has been in his position for only a short time, has enormous pressure to demonstrate that the Islamic Republic is not afraid, that the change in leadership has not produced a softer, more accommodating Iran. The hardline faction that consolidated power in the succession process drew its legitimacy, in large part, from the argument that Iran had been too patient, too strategic, too indirect in its confrontation with Israel and the United States, that the policy of using proxies and maintaining plausible deniability was actually a form of weakness dressed up as cleverness. Tonight's strike is, in one sense, the new leadership making good on that argument, showing the constituency that brought it to power that the era of restraint is over. But here is the problem with that calculation, and it is a profound one. Restraint, in the context of Iranian-Israeli relations, was never primarily about fear. It was about survival. The Islamic Republic has endured because it has been careful enough, strategic enough, patient enough to avoid giving Israel and the United States the unambiguous justification they would need to launch the kind of comprehensive military campaign that could threaten the regime's existence. Every time Iran has moved aggressively, every time it has crossed a line, it has done so in ways that were calibrated to provoke retaliation that it could survive. Tonight, that calculus may have broken down. Tonight, the strike on Israel's most critical military base may have provided exactly the justification that Israeli hawks and American hardliners have been waiting for. I want to make sure I bring something into this conversation that I think often gets lost in the fire and noise of military conflict, and that is the human dimension. There are Israeli military personnel at that base tonight who went to work this morning not knowing that their base was going to be struck by Iranian ballistic missiles. There are Israeli families right now, parents, spouses, children, who are watching the news with a terror that is intimate and specific in a way that nobody who hasn't lived it can fully understand. There are Iranians too who had nothing to do with the decision made by their government tonight, who will bear the consequences of whatever retaliation follows. Ordinary people who live in cities near military installations, near infrastructure that will become targets, near the blast radius of a conflict that their leadership chose without asking them. War is not an abstraction. It never is. Every missile that was fired tonight toward that Israeli base was fired at human beings. Some of them may be dead or wounded as I speak to you right now. And every missile that Israel fires in response will be aimed at human beings on the other end. I will not pretend otherwise, and I will not allow the language of strategy and doctrine and deterrence to fully obscure the human reality of what is happening tonight. That reality matters. Those lives matter, and any policy response, any military decision, any strategic calculation that does not account for that human cost is not wisdom. It is something else. The next 24 hours are going to be among the most consequential in the recent history of this region. Israel will respond. The United States will make choices about how far it stands behind that response. Iran will react to whatever Israel does. The proxies will take their cues from Tehran. The oil markets will convulse. The diplomatic phone lines between Washington and Moscow and Beijing and Riyadh and Ankara and Brussels will be burning up with calls that most of us will never hear. And somewhere in all of that noise and fear and strategic maneuvering, the question of whether this becomes a regional war or a severe but contained escalation will be answered, not by fate, not by history, but by the decisions of specific human beings in positions of power who are choosing right now, tonight, what kind of world they want to leave behind them. We are going to stay on this. I am not going anywhere. Our team is not going anywhere. This is the most important story in the world tonight, and we are going to cover it with everything we have, with precision, with honesty, with the kind of depth and context that you deserve and that this moment demands. If you are watching this and you are not already subscribed to this channel, please do it right now. Hit that subscribe button, turn on every notification, because this story is going to keep developing through the night, through tomorrow, through the days ahead, and you need to be here for every update, every confirmed development, every moment of clarity in what is right now a very fast-moving and very dangerous situation. I'm Rachel Maddow. This is USA News. We are watching history tonight, and we are watching it together. Stay with us.